The cloud. So let me welcome everybody to this next Lunch and Learn that Crossroads of Caring is offering. We do these about 6 times a year, and they're primarily directed at folks who are within our partner agencies or agencies that are represented on our professional advisory council or our governing board, and our alumni and current students. So we send out an invitation and you're welcome to attend this live session, and we also record it. And then those recordings are all listed and archived on our website, and you can find them under educational programs. And then if you go down and click on Lunch and Learns, it'll take you to the recordings. So please feel free to go and peruse. This is our 5th one, I think. We started them in 2020. And today we're welcoming the Reverend Deven Hubert, who is the Episcopal, she's at the Episcopal SeniorLife Communities, and she's the chaplain there. And she's going to be talking about worship and spiritual care with seniors with dementia. So before we get started here, it'd be good for us just to go around and maybe introduce ourselves. Deven, is there something in particular you would like to know about folks, or can we just do like name and organization? And
yes, I'd say what got them interested in hearing about this topic. How have they connected with the Lunch and Learn? How do they hear about it? Are they a CP student, or are they a board member, or how did they get interested in this and make the connection?
That's great. So for those that don't know me, and I think you all know me, I'm Mary Ann Brody, and I'm the executive director of Crossroads of Caring, and also an ACPE certified educator, and leading a unit right now. So I'm going to, it's a small group. So Joanne, why don't you go next?
Okay, yes, this is Joanne McGee, and I just found out about the topic just recently. This is my first unit of CPE, and I'm doing it with Ennis Presence Ministries Church. But it sounded very interesting because I've had an interest in Alzheimer's and dementia, and people who suffer in that area. So I'm just trying to find learn as much as I can about the topic.
Thanks, Joanne. Maureen, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. So I'm Maureen Toot. I'm a chaplain at Arnott Health. And in the acute hospital, obviously we care for patients who come in who are dealing with dementia. And at 2 of our facilities, we have large skilled nursing facilities also that we provide services to. So I'd just like to learn more about how to meet the needs of the residents who are dealing with dementia.
Thanks, Maureen. So Deven, I'm going to let you say more about yourself and your experience and what brings you here for this topic, and then just to go from there.
Okay.
Thanks for being here.
All right. Sounds great. Well, as Mary Ann said, I'm Deven Hubert, and I'm the head chaplain at Episcopal SeniorLife Communities. We have a number of facilities. We have 2 memory care units. We have 3 assisted living facilities. We have 4 independent living facilities. We have a nursing home, and we also have a rehabilitation center. And our facilities most of them are located, around the Rochester area. The building that I'm at most of the time is on Mount Hope Boulevard in Rochester, but we have a facility in Gates, Henrietta, Honeywood Falls, just around the area. Most of the facilities are pretty much within an hour drive of the building where I'm located right now. And I've actually been ordained in the Episcopal Church a little over 30 years. During part of that time, I have done chaplaincy work. I actually did chaplaincy work early in my career for 5 years, not too long after I was ordained. And then I've also done parish ministry, and I've worked at an Episcopal school for a number of years. I've done some work with the homeless. a variety of things. And I've sort of rounded back and kind of gone for full circle in a way. And now am back with working with older adults here. And I'm just really loving the ministry and loving what I do here. I thought I would start by talking about worship with residents with dementia, and then also talk about pastoral care next. In terms of worship, where I primarily, I do worship actually with residents in all of our facilities. So I work with people of different cognitive ability, but this workshop today is particularly concerned with people with dementia. So that's where I'll focus my remarks, at least certainly initially. And we may toward the end talk a little bit about working with people that are higher functioning, but we'll start by talking about working with people with dementia. So as I said, we have a couple of memory care units at 2 of our facilities, and then we have our nursing home facility, and one of our units in the nursing home is particularly geared toward residents with pretty severe dementia. And then there are residents that have dementia on some of the other units, but not at the same level of severity. So I do worship on the memory care units and in the nursing home on the unit with people with a high level of dementia. And first of all, in terms of numbers of people at a worship service, I might have maybe 13 to 20 people participating in a service. When I go to the memory care units at our other facilities, a lot of times people are sitting in 2 semicircles around me. So I'll be kind of in the center, and there'll be a couple of semicircles of chairs, or people will be on couches or lounge chairs and that sort of thing. And then when I do a service in the nursing home, some of the people are at tables and some of them are in a circle otherwise. So I try to have it so it's not just, straight rows across, but something that's a little, maybe it feels a little warmer for the residents than that might feel. And with the people in memory care, sometimes I will use a simple bulletin in the 2 memory care units. And it's very simple. It's front and back at the most. I would put the words that I'm using for the hymns or other songs in the bulletin. But otherwise, it just has a basic format. If we're going to say the 23rd Psalm or Psalm 121 or something like that, that would be in the bulletin. But it's a very simple, easy to use bulletin. And most of the people in our memory care units can follow along and use that bulletin pretty well. In the nursing home dementia unit, I don't use a bulletin because just the capacity of the people to use it isn't there. So I just do everything by kind of walking them through it and talking and going through things as I go along. And that seems to work out pretty well in worship with them. One of the things that is, I think a lot of people find really amazing with working with people with dementia is how much they connect with music. And I think this is one of the things that I think people are recognizing more and more. And I know it's something that's being studied. And I hope a lot more study will happen in this area because it's absolutely fascinating. For example, you'll have people that are almost nonverbal, people with dementia that you can hardly get any conversation about. And then it's Christmas time and they're singing the first verse of all the Christmas carols. And you're just kind of like, wow. I mean, there's something about music that people, where that part of our brain is, the part of our brain that learns music, just seems to stay more functional than other parts of our brain, and however it works. And I'm trying to do a little reading on it now, and I haven't done enough yet. But it just seems like so often you can engage people with music in a way that you can't engage people in conversation very often. And so what I often do with a service is I have a Bluetooth speaker that I will take around with me to the various places where I do services. And a lot of times I will open a service by playing a piece of music on the Bluetooth speaker. And it might be, for example, a familiar hymn. It could be something like Holy, 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 or Oh God, Our Help in Ages Past. And it might be sung by a choir or an individual, or it might just be instrumental. Like I have a beautiful piano piece to Amazing Grace, for example, that I might use. And so one of the things I use is hymns. Another thing sometimes I use is classical pieces of music. Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring might be a piece I would use. Depending on the mood of the service or what the service is about, I'll pick an appropriate piece of classical music that might really go well with what I'm planning to do that day. Another thing I use sometimes is Christian folk music. And I'm in my 60s at this point, so I've been around a while. And one of the artists I use often in music is John Michael Talbot, who, I mean, some of you are too young to know who John Michael Talbot is. You know, Marianne knows, okay. But a lot of his music, it's very, some of it's very quiet and peaceful, some of it's very joyous, but often I use his music as a way to lead into worship, because some of it's very soothing and some of it also just sort of prepares us and sets the tone to begin a worship service. And then sometimes I use contemporary Christian music. Occasionally I'll use something that I've just heard, or I do searches on iTunes to try to find interesting things. And sometimes I've used contemporary artists singing a familiar hymn, but doing a more contemporary version of that hymn. And some of those have been well received, and they're a little different than what a person might hear normally, but that I think they work well as well. So oftentimes I open with that. And then after that, I usually get the residents singing. And there I do also a combination of different types of music. I might do a very familiar hymn with people. Like, for example, a lot of people remember at least the first verse of Amazing Grace. I can do an Amazing Grace up on a dementia unit, and a lot of people know that first verse by heart, even if they can't articulate a lot to me otherwise. A lot of people just know that. And a lot of times when I do a hymn with people on a dementia unit, what I'll do is I'll read the words to the hymn out loud first, say to the first verse, and then we'll sing it. And maybe, let's say we're going to sing the words to the last verse. I'll read those words out loud, and then we'll sing it. And that seems to work really well. Other hymns might be How Great Thou Art, for example, In the Garden. I mean, others that are very well known to a lot of people. And I also try to keep conscious of the audience I have and giving variety. Like, for example, in Rochester, because I'm located in Rochester, we have a lot of Roman Catholic residents. And I know there are certain kinds of hymns that probably a lot of Roman Catholic residents would know. And then there are hymns that Protestant people would be more likely to know. And like someone from a Baptist tradition would probably know different hymns than someone from a Roman Catholic tradition. So I try to sing a variety with the people so that if I don't connect with someone on one hymn, maybe I'll connect with them on another hymn. And that seems to work pretty well. Another thing I do in terms of music is a lot of what I might call camp-like or church school type songs. Things that have simple repetitive verses, for example. Like there's a song, Father, We Adore You, that I use a lot. The song, This Little Light of Mine. The song, Do Lord. Rejoice in the Lord always. I've got Peace Like a River. Those are just a few that come to mind. And with some of the songs, I've actually developed gestures that I encourage the people to do with me. And not everyone does this, but some people do it. And some people can't sing, but they can do the gestures. So it's sort of, I try to engage as many people as possible in doing things with me. So for example, the song, I've got Peace Like a River, I've got arm motions that go with that. That I encourage people to do with me. And what I'll say to them is, sometimes I'll say something like, well, when I come up in the floor, I like to get people to exercise with me. I always want to get more exercise. I want you to get exercise with me. So if you want to join with me and we'll burn a few calories. I mean, I might say something like that. And that way, if they're a little shy about doing the motions, they might, I might have humored them a little bit into doing it. And I had fun with them at the same time. So, so for some of the songs, I might try doing gestures with them. Then after that, oftentimes we'll say the 23rd Psalm, which a lot of people know at least part of it by heart, even if they have dementia. That is one of those things that is in. A lot of people had to memorize the 23rd Psalm when they were younger at some point in their life. So a lot of people can say at least part of that, if not all of it. I want to do some more experimenting with other Psalms like 121 and some things like that. So I may do some more different things in the future with that. Then often I do a short Bible story or message, very short kind of message or something of some kind. And then after that, I often do another song that will lead into our praying together. And a lot of times the Psalms might have to do, or the song might have to do with prayer. Like the song Kumbaya, which a lot of people remember. And Kumbaya, of course, means come by here. So we're asking God to come by here and be with us. And so that'll be a song that we will sometimes use to lead into prayer. There's a song, Thank You, Lord. There's a song, Standing in the Need of Prayer. So those are some of the things that I use with them. And then we'll say the Lord's Prayer together. And when I introduce it, I always say that now we'll say the Lord's Prayer together, which is also called the Our Father, because for the Roman Catholics in the crowd, they would call it the Our Father. The Protestants would call it the Lord's Prayer. And then that everyone, who's able to understand that knows what's coming. And then a lot of people can still say the Lord's Prayer if they have dementia, or at least say part of it. So that always is a good thing to use. Then after that, what I typically do is ask the residents if there's anything special they would like us to pray for that day. If there's a person they would like us to pray, or a situation they would like us to pray for. And I find very few people can do that. It's a very limited number in my population when I do those services. Very few people can come up with those things. But in the group, I mean, because on a dementia unit, you're going to have people in various places. They're not equal in how much dementia they have, what stage they're at. Some people are able to communicate more. Some people are able to understand more. So a lot of times what I do, if I know those people that could respond to that, I'll go around to them personally and I'll say, I'll say the person's name. Can you think of anything we could pray for today? And then they might be able to say my family, or they might be able to say peace in the world. But I know not everyone in the room will be able to respond to that. So I will go around kind of selectively to those people that I think might be able to. And then that way, and then I'll use what they've come up with and add a few things to say some prayers. So typically we'll pray for the residents themselves, family members. We'll pray for the staff that work with them in their work and also in their lives outside of their work. Right now we are praying for the situation in Ukraine, even though not everyone in the room can understand that, what's going on there, but they do understand praying for peace, they might understand that we're praying for peace in the world. So we do include that in the prayers. Then after that, since we're an Episcopal related facility, so typically I offer people communion. And most people do want to take communion and take communion readily from me. The exceptions are there are a few people that choose not to take it. And I can't, of course, give it to someone who is not able to swallow it because, of course, some people with dementia are on puree diets. They're at a level where they could not safely swallow a communion wafer. And so for people like that, I don't give them communion, and I know who they are, or the staff will alert me, for example, if there's a new person, whether they're able to take communion or not. So I have an awareness of who can take it, who can't take it. But most people will readily, cup their hands. And our rule now with COVID currently is they have to be able to take it in their hands themselves and put it in their mouth themselves for me to give it to them. I'm not putting it directly in their mouth myself. And I always sanitize my hands before distributing it. So that, again, a COVID precaution. So, but as I said, they readily will take communion. Then after that, there's a closing sentence or a blessing of some kind. And oftentimes we close with, he's got the whole world in his hands. It's almost a tradition around here that we close with that. And I have arm gestures that we do with that. And they enjoy that. They have a lot of fun with that and we have a good time. In terms of length of service with the on the memory care units at the other facilities, the services are usually about 30 minutes long. In the nursing home on the unit here, it's about 45 minutes long. So obviously I can shorten or lengthen as need be. But it's for me, I keep it as like a personal challenge to kind of try to get as much response out of people as possible in these services. And frankly, I have a lot of fun. I have a really good time with them. And it brings a lot of joy to my life to do a service with the residents. It's really a neat thing to get to do. The other thing I forgot to mention is sometimes I'll gear things around a particular theme, like for example, the music. Like yesterday I was up on the dementia unit, and I focused on St. Patrick's Day. So the music that I played some traditional hymns, but they were done in a Celtic way with Celtic instruments, and the singers were Celtic singers. And for example, I might do a special service for Martin Luther King Jr.'s birthday. And so we'll sing some of Martin Luther King Jr.'s favorite hymns. And we sang "We Shall Overcome" along with Pete Seeger. And I was almost in tears. I mean, hearing them sing that. And a lot of them remembered it and they were just into it. So it's really cool to just kind of experiment and see how much reaction and response you can get from people. I don't know if you want to ask questions about worship before I go on to pastoral care, or if you want to wait to the end for questions. Marianne, what do you think would be best? Any thoughts?
I think we could take some questions now if people have them.
Okay, all right.
That's okay with you?
Sure. Any questions about worship or anything from your experience? You may have done things yourselves in worship with people with dementia that you could share as well.
I was curious, do you have other staff people who are there with you during the service?
There are usually in the room, well, first of all, in the nursing home, there's essentially always a staff member in the room, just honestly for kind of safety purposes. Like if someone, just like there's always a staff person in each lounge. like if a resident would try to get up out of their chair and needed
Right.
to be guided to sit back down or something like that. So there typically is a person in the room. And it's interesting because some of them will participate in the service, some won't. It just depends on the individual aide. If they themselves are a religious person, or like some of them will sing along, some of them will I always offer them communion. Some of them will take communion, some of them will say no. But there is always someone there. And that too helps, because occasionally in the nursing home, for example, a family member might come to visit with one of the residents that's in the group with me, and that staff person can get the person out of the group so that they can go back to their room and visit with their family member. So it's always good to have a extra person there as well. So occasionally too, I have hospice workers in the room with me. Like there might be a hospice visitor to one of the residents, and it happens to be when they're visiting. And sometimes they participate. There's one woman in particular that almost always will take part when I'm doing a service. And she's, totally participating with the bulletin and everything. So that's kind of neat. Yeah. Any other questions?
The services we do in Elmira are quite similar, I think, to what you've described. But
Mhm.
I like your comments about the gestures, because
Okay.
we have a fair number of people who are nonverbal,
Mhm.
but come, and that might be another way to connect. So I like that suggestion. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you think about a song, there might be something like pieces flowing like a river. A gesture might be like doing like doing this, like flowing like a river. And then like one of the songs I do is the first verse is I've got peace like a river. And then I've got joy, or I've got love like an ocean. You make a heart in the air with your fingers. I've got joy like a fountain. You have your hands coming down like this, joy like a fountain. He's got the whole world in his hands. You could do like he's got the whole world and your hands together in his hands. And then you have you and me, brother, you and me, brother, you and me, sister. Rock the little baby. And he's got everybody, hands up, wiggle your fingers for everybody. And that one I always say, lift your hands as high as you can if you're able, and wiggle your fingers, and that's everybody. So just stuff like that. And I just have fun with them. Another song we do is Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. It's an old song. And for that one, I get people leaning with me. Like every time we sing lean, we lean. And I think they enjoy it. So yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
Do you encourage family members to attend the services? I know probably pandemic has changed things a little bit, but
right now they can't because of the pandemic. Right now, when visitors come in, they have to visit with the residents in their rooms or in designated areas like downstairs on the first floor. In the past, though, yes. And hopefully in the future, if things open up more and more, we can resume that. So yes, because we have had family members that have enjoyed sitting in and participating with their loved ones in the services.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Thank you.
It was interesting to me, Deven, how most of the things that you've talked about using like music, the singing, the motions, they're all making them physically participate as opposed to just watching something.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I was thinking how in our technological world, we like to project things, or we like to, have visual things, but really it sounds like, especially with these folks, it's better if they're kind of physically involved in whatever is happening. Would you say that's true or no?
I think so. Well, and the other thing is, I guess another thing I consider is, frankly, when there isn't an activity in the lounge, the television is on. So there's a lot of time when the TV is on, or sometimes the TV will be to a channel where they'll have music playing. So sometimes that'll happen. You know how they have those channels where you see a view, you see something, and then there's music. So some of that goes on up on the floors, but I've wanted something where they're just more engaged with me and with people. So that's why I haven't really done something like on a screen with those people.
Right. Maybe that's what I'm picking up, is that it's an interpersonal engagement.
Yeah, that's what I'm striving for, I would
Yeah.
say. One of the things I want to experiment with more, that I was reading a book recently, and I don't have the title offhand. I might be able to get it and send it to you, Mary Ann, but I was looking for it in my closet, but I may have taken it home. But I was reading about a person that worked, another clergy person that worked with people with dementia, and she used visual. She would take things into her to the worship service, like, for example, take into the worship service a cross, an actual cross, or maybe a couple of different crosses, and use them as part of her talk, or whatever her time with the residents, have something like that visual for them to look at. And I haven't really done a lot of that, but that's something I'd be interested in experimenting with more, that I might try. Something that's tactile that they could hold on to. So,
Yeah, thanks.
well, should we go on to talking about pastoral care a little bit? Are we ready?
Yes.
Okay. Great. Let me flip over here.
Mhm.
All right, in terms of visits with residents with dementia, I thought about my own experience, but I also talked to people in our recreation department here. I talked to my fellow chaplain, Patty Cummings, because I was interested not only in what strikes me, but also what other people find they use and what seems to work with working with dementia residents the best. Part of it is approaching people calmly and in a relaxed kind of a manner when you're going up to a person with dementia to talk with them. Just be calm, be relaxed, try to be a non-anxious presence around them. Obviously, to be friendly. One of the challenges now, of course, with our units, on all of our units, I still have to wear a mask. So they can't see my whole face at this point. So they can't see a smile, unfortunately. So hopefully we can kind of smile with our eyes as much as possible. But if we're smiling with our mouth, it's showing in our face as well. So just to come across as a friendly, welcoming, non-anxious person, look in the resident's eye, make eye contact with them. A lot of it is meeting them where they are, like wherever they are at cognitively, you meet them where they are. And as I said earlier, on a dementia unit, people are going to be in different places. Some people will be higher functioning than other people, even though they're on the same unit. So you have to get to know each resident individually, kind of where they are, and kind of how much you get to know how much conversation each individual is able to engage in. And some people with dementia, of course, are walkers. I mean, I think a lot of us have read that there are some people with dementia that are just almost like constant motion. It's very hard to get them to sit down and sit down and talk or something. So if that's the case, if you're meeting them where they are, you walk with them. You know, you walk the hall with them and have a little conversation with them while they're walking. So you meet them at the level that they're at and where they are. And people have, obviously, as I said, different levels of ability of how much they can engage in conversation. For example, there's a gentleman on a dementia unit that I've worked on who could talk about where he went to college. He could talk about what he majored in. He could talk about how he met his wife. When he entered our facility, he was able to carry on a pretty meaningful conversation. That's no longer the case with that particular resident, but I got to know him at a point where we could engage and have those kind of meaningful conversations. Another woman, when she came in, was still able to regularly pray the rosary herself. I mean, that was a big part of her day. A big part of her life was praying the rosary. She was a very devout Catholic woman. She would talk about her prayer life. We would say the Lord's Prayer together, and she would talk about her faith, and we could engage in that kind of a conversation. I have another woman that we could also talk about her life and her family and everything. And at the end of the conversation, I would typically offer to say a prayer with her. And so I would say a prayer with her, for her. And then after that, she would say a prayer for me. And the prayers she said for me were amazing. I mean, it's as if she knew me really well. And they were just very inspirational, very deep prayers. I mean, she would pray that I would be able to be effective in my ministry and work really well with people. And, just, she would sort of go on and on. I mean, it was just amazing. It's just great to have that experience with her. And just the fact that it was this two-way street. It wasn't like me saying a prayer for her, but she was saying a prayer for me. And sometimes with the residents, it really is, we're saying a prayer together. With residents too, if I feel the person is capable of it, sometimes I will ask them if they'd like to say the Lord's Prayer with me, for example, and we'll say it together. So again, it's trying to meet people where they're at, what level they're at, if they're able to do something like that or not. Another thing with working with residents with dementia and pastoral care is just accepting the fact that a lot of the residents will not remember that they had the conversation with you. So you'll have a conversation with a person, but you have to accept that you're in the moment with this person. And if you came back with them a little later today, they may not remember that they saw you earlier in the day. They may not remember they had a conversation with you. So you just accept that you're encountering a person in the moment, and that's what it is. And there are some residents on our dementia unit who would be able maybe to remember they talked with me, but a lot of them wouldn't. So you just accept that's what the reality of the ministry is. You also, of course, have to be patient. That a lot of times people in memory care will repeatedly ask the same questions over and over again. So a person will ask you a question, you'll have a little conversation about it. 10 minutes later, they'll ask you the same question again. I mean, that of course is very common with people with dementia. So you just be patient with that reality and just accept that reality of their condition. I try to get to know the names of all the people that I work with so that I can address them personally by name. And I call people by their first name. And that's one of the things it's a little controversial in healthcare, I find, is whether you should call people by Mr. So-and-so or Mrs. So-and-so as a sign of respect for them. Maybe what I find for myself, perhaps when I first meet someone, I may say that, but then because I feel I pray with people, if I say a prayer with someone, I'm not going to say, now I'm going to say, I'd like to say a prayer for Mr. So-and-so. I mean, it sounds so formal and distant and all that. So if I'm saying a prayer with someone, I'm going to use their first name. And sometimes I will ask them what name they like to go by, because some people don't like to go by their actual given name. Like, for example, a Sarah may go by Sally, a Margaret may go by Peggy. So sometimes I will ask a person what they like to be called or what their name is. And if they say Peggy, then I would say Peggy in the prayer. So I do use first names with the residents. And I find that the recreation department that works with them every day, they use first names. Most of the staff that's closest in closest contact with them uses first names. I think it's more, people in the organization that don't have as much direct contact, day-to-day contact, maybe use the Mr. or Mrs. or Ms. more with residents. Another tip I got from another staff member was they said they try as best they can to remember the names of the family members of the resident, so they can refer by name to the resident about their family member. They could say, "Oh, I'm glad that I saw Anita visiting you today," or "Anita told me she'll be in later today," or something like that. And some of our residents know the names of their family members and remember the names of their family members. There are also our residents that unfortunately don't. So that's not going to be meaningful for everybody, but for those residents that cognitively recognize their children's names, for example, and say their children's names, if we know those names and can say those names to them, that gives them just another kind of connection, which is nice. Sometimes residents will not remember, for example, that someone has died. It's not unusual, I find, for some residents to think their parents are still living. So you'll have someone in their 80s or 90s, they think their parent is still living. And what I do is I do not correct them on that. I think years ago in ministry, I think many years ago when I was in seminary, I think there was more of the teaching was more to do reality therapy with people. You want to, orient people. And so if someone's no longer living, you try to tell them that someone has passed away and get them to accept that. What I find with people with dementia is most of them that's not going to connect. If their mother is dying, that's just not their reality. They're not going to connect that that's true. And if you were to say that to them, they wouldn't even remember it later. So why do that? Why try to orient them to something like that if they have dementia and they're not going to recall it? And if anything, it might harm rather than do any good for the person. So, like, for example, in a worship service, I have one resident who will fairly often say, "Can we say a prayer for my mother?" And when she says it, she clearly thinks her mother's still living. And so when I say the prayer, I might say a prayer for her mother, but I'll say a prayer for all of our family members, both those that are alive and those that aren't living anymore. I might say something like that, or just say not only a prayer for her, but a prayer for the other residents and their family members, both living and those who passed away. So there are ways that you can work with something like that. Let's see.
Deven, can I say something?
Sure. Yeah, I'll be interested to hear your view of that too.
No, I was just thinking, you've said some really interesting things that have sparked my thinking, like first about names. And I thought, people with dementia, they may not even remember they're married. Like,
yeah,
so
you're right.
Them Mrs. or,
yeah, right.
Their name, their given name, whatever name they're used to have been called as when they were younger, is they're going to respond to that. I think, my experience is they'll respond to that more readily. Then it could be confusing. Like, I don't want to introduce more confusion into their life.
Right.
So whatever I can do to connect them to what they know or what they're familiar with. And then what you were just talking about with people dying, I had a parishioner that I didn't know well that I went to visit. And she kept asking about this very good friend of hers who I knew, who was also a parishioner who had died several years ago. And the first time she said, well, how is so-and-so? And I said, well, do you remember that she died a couple of years? She's like, oh, she was distraught. And then we went on. And then she asked me, well, what about so-and-so? And silly me, I said, what, remember we said she died just a couple, and I thought, oh my God, I'm re-traumatizing this poor woman.
Yeah.
So the third
Why
time,
do
I just
that?
went to her, I said, well, why don't you tell me about how you met her? And so we talked about her, and that was very comforting for her to be able to talk about it. She didn't think she was dead, but it didn't matter. You're right. It doesn't matter in the long run. But it was much more comforting for her to talk about this wonderful friendship she had with this wonderful woman.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes if I'm in a private conversation, I might ask, well, can you tell me about your mother? What is your mother like? Or I might ask what the person was like. Though one time I did that with someone. It was someone who thought her husband was still living and wanted to, wondered where he was and kept asking where her husband was. And so I said to her, well, tell me about her husband. Oh, tell me about your husband. And I won't say the word she said, but it was something like, oh, he's a blank. I won't say what she said because this is being taped. But it just took me back, and it was kind of fun. I mean, I had to come downstairs afterward and just kind of get a chuckle about it because she told me what she thought of her husband. And then I wondered why she was really looking for him. So anyway.
Yeah, they can be so blatantly honest.
Oh, absolutely.
The filters start to come off.
Oh, that's true. That's true, definitely. Let's see. What else? Oh, another thing is just to mention, we don't have a lot of time left, is touch, the place of touch in terms of working with people with dementia. Obviously, touching with anyone, I think in our world today, we're so aware of the potential of abuse, harassment and all that. We're all, sensitized that we got to be careful about touch. What I find with people with dementia, occasionally I will touch someone on the shoulder, something like that. Pre-COVID, I might hold someone's hand or something like that, or touch them on the hand. We're just starting to get back to that a little. I mean, it was weird with COVID to go through this long period where you couldn't touch someone on a hand at all or anything like that. I mean, it was just, we weren't allowed to do that because of the virus. I mean, we had to wear shields. Not only do we have the masks on, we had to wear the shields, so that was difficult. But now I'm sort of gingerly getting back to a little bit of touching someone's hand here and there or shaking someone's hand. But then I always wash my hand after that person before I would go to another person. But certainly with COVID, that's been a big challenge. And I'm very careful how I use touch, but it is appropriate at times to use that. It can be a comfort to people. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Mary Ann, on touch, or what you teach to your students around touch.
Especially, I think, with the elderly, and if they're in elder living situations, I think touch is really important. We were just having a conversation about this the other day, and just how much more they're alone, how less, the frequency of touch is much less. The intimacy of the touch that they get is probably less because they're not with family who might hug them or hold them or do the kinds of things that as professionals we don't do. So touching them on the hand, touching them on the forearm or the shoulder, maybe putting a hand on their back, those kinds of less intimate touching can be really, really beneficial. But always to do it and to pay attention to the response you're getting from the other person. If it looks like it's not being received well, then you pull away, you stop. But those kinds of touch can be really, really comforting to people. And I'm thinking, especially with people with suffering with dementia, it's more of that interpersonal connection, you know, that we were talking about earlier. It's, I'm here, like it makes you present in a way that maybe just verbally we're not. The touch makes it concrete. I don't know. That's kind of how I think about it. And others may have different thoughts. I don't know.
Well,
Joanne, were you going to say something?
Yes, I remember there were times when I think it was when I was at Bath, the nursing home there, like if a resident wanted to have prayer, sometimes they would reach out their hand to me for me to hold their hand. And, you know, I just could not do it, especially when they reached out to, but, you know, that was something that they were comfortable with. And as long as they were reaching out to me, then I just kind of went along with it. And, you know, it seemed to, you know, they were very receptive of it. And so that was one of the ways I, you know, incorporated the touch part.
Yeah, I find the same thing. A lot of times it'll be a resident reaching out for my hand, and not necessarily the other way, but them reaching for me and wanting my hand for a minute. Yeah. Yeah, that happens quite a bit.
So we have about 5 minutes.
Just a few last things. I mean, sometimes with, I just want to touch real quickly on residents when they're close to passing away and their families that, I mean, I try to especially spend time with people when they're close to passing away in their room. And oftentimes family members are present for that. So spending time talking with the families, talking to the resident even if the resident doesn't respond. Of course, I think we all know that we believe that hearing is the last sense that a person loses. So we talk to people even though they can't respond to us, and say prayers for them. In the Episcopal Church, we have a service that we do when people are close to the time of death. So if the family requests it, I might do that service with someone. And family contact too, I think is important, not only at the time of death, but otherwise with family members, with residents with dementia, because like if you can see someone, for example, in the hallway with their loved one and just stop for a minute, say hello, just say a few words to them. The families tend to appreciate that you're acknowledging them and their loved one, and just taking the time to stop and greet them and talk for a few minutes is appreciated. And sometimes, of course, even talking to family members in the elevator, or sometimes I might call a family member if there's a particular thing going on, like someone signed on to hospice or something like that. So the family contacts are important, and those relationships as well that you develop in this type of ministry. And also staff. I mean, staff really get close to the residents. And for example, when a resident passes away, just providing pastoral care to the staff. I mean, they might need a hug because they've lost someone that they've cared for years. And I know recently I was in the room with a woman who was close to passing away, and you know, various staff members were coming in and spending time with her before she died, and it was just good to kind of be there and support the staff as they came in and said their goodbyes and things like that too. So they get close to people.
Any last questions or comments as we're drawing to a close here? Deven, I really appreciate you being willing to be with us today and for sharing your experiences at Episcopal Senior Life and from your other life experiences with people and providing care. They're lucky to have you there.
Oh, thank you. Well, I love what I do. I'm having a good time.
I can tell. You're definitely animated and excited when you talk about it. So definitely you like what you do. And I'm sure that comes through to the people that you serve as well.
Thank you very much.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you all for coming.
All righty.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
Okay.
you.